AITA for demanding full repayment and ending my living arrangement after discovering my roommate sold my console on Marketplace, then calling it a temporary loan when I confronted him. I noticed the empty space first. A neat rectangle of dust where my console used to sit. 2 HDMI cables curled like shed snakes on the shelf. The controller dock was gone. The second controller was gone. The little memory card case I kept next to the TV had vanished too. I stood still and tried not to panic. I told myself there had to be a normal explanation. A deep clean. A quick repair. Maybe my roommate borrowed it for a party. Maybe. I texted him. No answer. I called. Straight to voicemail. I walked the apartment. Nothing was out of place. The front door showed no sign of forced entry. My room was locked. The living room windows were shut. Only the TV console looked surgically altered. Something I loved had been removed as if it were never part of the picture. I did what people do when they're scared and angry at the same time. I opened my phone. I typed the model of my console into Marketplace. I added the word for our neighborhood. I scrolled, and then I stopped. There it was. My exact model. The same small scratch near the front USB port. The same matte skin on the side panel. The same sticker from my college gaming club, half peeled. The photos were crisp and familiar. The listing had been posted 2 hours earlier. Price was just under the going rate, which meant it would move fast. The seller name made my stomach drop. It was my roommate's handle, not his legal name, but the one he uses for everything online. Same profile photo of him in a beanie, grinning under a neon sign. I clicked into the chat and typed as if I were any other buyer. I asked if it was still available. I asked for a close-up of the front port. I asked if the second controller was included. He replied in seconds. Yes, yes, yes. He even sent a new close-up. The scratch lined up perfectly. The reflection in the plastic showed our living room rug. It felt like someone held a mirror up to a betrayal. I took screenshots. I saved the listing link. I saved the chat. And I sat on the floor in front of the empty space where my console used to be, holding my phone like a life raft, trying to decide who I would be in the next hour. I could wait. I could pretend I had not seen it. I could hope he would bring it back and apologize and promise it was all a misunderstanding. Or I could follow the facts where they were leading me. Toward a door I had not wanted to open. Toward a word I had not wanted to use. Theft. We moved in together 9 months ago. A friend of a friend situation. Rent in our city is an obstacle course, and pairing up with a roommate is the only way most people make it to the end. On paper, we were a good match. Same schedule, similar age, both quiet at night. We agreed on basic rules. We would split utilities and groceries that live in common spaces. We would ask before borrowing anything that cost more than a few dollars. We would lock our bedroom doors. We would keep the living room clear. We shook hands. We meant it. The first months were easy. He paid rent on time. He cooked and always offered to share. He laughed at my terrible jokes about spreadsheets. When my family visited, he was polite and disappeared into his room to give us space. I thought we were going to be one of those calm roommate stories. I thought I had cracked the code, but small things started to slide. A pair of headphones went missing for a week. He returned them with a sheepish smile and said he had borrowed them to test a mix. A portable speaker disappeared and reappeared after a weekend trip. He said he had taken to the park and forgot to ask because he thought I would not mind. A streaming account logged me out because someone had changed the password. He said he was trying to fix it and somehow made it worse. None of it felt enormous in the moment. Each incident was small enough to forgive. Money got tight for him in month 5. He started paying utilities a few days late. He promised it was temporary. A freelance contract got delayed. A client had not paid. He sent screenshots of emails as if to prove it was all just timing. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. We all hit rough patches. I covered the gap once or twice, and he paid me back a week later. I told myself we were building trust. We talked about boundaries. We wrote a list and stuck it on the fridge. Ask before borrowing. Replace what you use. Communicate if you break something. No cash advances from the other person. No surprise guests overnight. It looked tidy and official in black marker. It made me feel safe. And then the console went missing. And the list on the fridge felt like a note from a past life where I thought words on paper could hold back a rising tide. I kept thinking about the moment we agreed that we would not borrow expensive items without permission. The console is not just a toy. It is a gift from my sister. It is hours of saved progress. It is a small joy at the end of hard days. It is mine. It was a Thursday. I remember because my team had finished a release that afternoon, and I had planned a quiet night in. I picked up takeout on the walk home. I was excited to try a new game I had downloaded and not yet opened. I had been saving it like a dessert. I opened the door, and everything smelled like sesame and garlic, and the day felt good. I put the food on the counter. I kicked off my shoes. I pressed the TV power button. The screen woke up with that soft glow I love. I reached for the controller. It was not there. At first, I thought I had left the controller on my desk. I walked to my room. The door was locked. I didn't want to go digging. I walked back. I looked at the shelf. The dock had always lived right there. I felt a tiny gust of irrational panic because my brain already knew the shape of the truth. I crouched. I scanned. My heart did that skip like it missed a stair. The console was gone. I texted him, "Hey, did you move the console for cleaning?" He often vacuumed on Thursdays. Silence. I sent another. "Did we have a maintenance visit?" I checked email. No notice. I called. Straight to voicemail. I held the phone in my ear and listened to his recorded voice tell me to leave a message, and it sounded like a stranger. I opened the media cabinet. The games were still there. The empty slot where the console had been was an insult. I checked behind the TV in case he had unplugged it. The cables were still threaded through the clips. The HDMI was dangling loose. Someone had removed it carefully. Someone who knew the path of the cable through the clips. I told myself there was a good reason. I told myself I was overreacting. I put the food in the fridge because suddenly I was not hungry. I stood in the middle of the living room and felt my face getting hot. I tried to remember if he had said anything about a cousin visiting. I tried to remember if he had mentioned selling anything to make rent. I cannot find the memory because it did not exist. It is a strange thing to be in your own home and realize that the line between yours and ours has been crossed without your consent. It feels like someone touched a boundary you had painted in bright colors and told you later that the paint did not count. I sat on the couch. I required proof, so I went looking for it. I opened Marketplace like it was a crime scene map. I typed the model and added the shorthand for our neighborhood and for the adjacent one. I filtered by today. I scrolled through rows of consoles that were not mine. Different angles, different living rooms, different little details that make a thing a specific thing. I kept scrolling, and then the photos stopped being other people's photos and became mine. The first image was a full shot of the console on our TV stand. The plant in the background was my plant. The second image was a close-up of the front. The small crescent scuff under the USB port matched the one I made when I bumped the case during a move. The third image was the controller dock with both controllers on it. One controller had a faint paint smear from a DIY project. The same smear I had meant to clean and never did. The listing headline said barely used. The description said includes 2 controllers and charging dock. The price was set low enough to be tempting. The timestamp said posted 2 hours ago. The location pin was our street. The seller name was my roommate's handle. He uses it for games. He uses it for food apps. He uses it for a lot of things. The profile photo showed him in a beanie under a pink neon sign from a bar we both know. My stomach dropped and kept falling. I clicked message. I did not write from my main account. I keep a second account for buying and selling used furniture. I wrote in the polite tone of a stranger. "Hi, is this still available?" He replied quickly. "Yes. Can meet tonight. Cash or transfer?" I asked for another close-up of the front port because I wanted to capture the scratch again in a fresh photo. He sent it. The reflection in the plastic caught a sliver of our rug. The truth felt heavy and simple. I asked if a second controller was included. He said yes in the dock. I asked why he was selling. He wrote need cash for travel. The casual lie pressed on my chest. I took screenshots of the listing. I took screenshots of the chat. I saved the profile. I copied the URL into a note. I wrote down the time. I breathed slowly. Then I scrolled the comments. Someone had already asked if it was still available. He told them first come, first served. I realized I was running a race I had not planned to run. If a stranger bought my console tonight, it would be harder to get it back. I needed to know where and when a handoff would happen. So I asked if we could meet at the cafe 2 blocks away. He said the train station would be easier. He offered time in 45 minutes. He said bring a backpack. I said okay. Then I messaged my friend, who lives nearby, and asked her to call me. I needed a witness. I needed a plan. Before I left the apartment, I messaged the buyer who had commented publicly on the listing. I said I was also interested and asked if they had already picked up the console. They replied that they were on their way to the station. I told them the console might be stolen from a roommate. They hesitated. They asked if I had proof. I sent a cropped photo of our TV stand and the scratch. I explained that the seller was my roommate and that I was trying to recover my property. They said they did not want to be involved in drama. I understood. I asked for one favor. If they decided not to buy, could they please let me know? If they did buy, could they hold on to any transfer receipt in case I needed it for a police report? They said they would think about it. I met my friend at the corner and told her what was happening. We decided not to approach him at the station. Public scenes turn messy fast. Instead, I messaged him again from a buyer account and asked if he could send a quick screenshot of the console powered on to show it worked. He replied that he was already at the station and could not plug it in. I said okay. 10 minutes later, the other buyer messaged me. They said the seller insisted on bank transfer before handing over the box. They asked if that was normal. I said it was not, and that cash on hand is safer for buyers. They said they were going to walk away. I thanked them for letting me know. 5 minutes later, they wrote again. He lowered the price if I transfer now. They asked me what to do. I said I could meet them and show them the original purchase receipt and serial number sticker. But the clock was ticking and they were nervous and they asked for a simple path. I suggested this. If you do buy it, please send me a screenshot of the transfer with your name redacted and the timestamp visible. I will blur your info if I ever need to show it. I only need the last 4 digits of the account he uses to receive the money. They agreed, reluctantly. Another 5 minutes passed. A screenshot arrived. It showed a bank transfer for an amount just under the listing price. The account number ended in digits I recognized. He had used that account to pay his shared utilities before. The timestamp matched the listing window. The memo said game console. It felt like holding a photograph of someone mid-step as they crossed a line. I thanked the buyer and asked one last question. Did he give you a box? Did he say anything about where it came from? They wrote that he said he was upgrading and needed quick cash. They got the console in a plain shopping bag. No box. No manual. No dock. He said he forgot the dock at home. My jaw tightened. He was piecing out my things if the price was right. I took a breath. I had what I needed. I had the listing. I had the chat. I had the transfer. I had the timeline. It was time to confront him. I waited for him in the kitchen. The apartment sounded larger without the console's quiet hum. I heard the front door unlock. He stepped in with empty hands and a casual hello. I asked him how his night was. He said fine. I asked him if anything interesting had happened. He said not really. The calmness irritated me more than yelling would have. I said, I'm going to ask a direct question. Did you sell my console tonight? He froze for a second and then tried to laugh. He said, no, of course not. What are you talking about? I said, your marketplace handle listed my console 2 hours ago. The photos show our living room. The scratch under the front port is mine. The buyer sent me a screenshot of the bank transfer. The last 4 digits match the account you use for utilities. He dropped a smile. He said it was not what it looked like. He said he borrowed it. He said he was going to buy it back next week when his paycheck cleared. He said he had an emergency and no one would lend to him because the bank takes too long. He took a step closer and lowered his voice like we were in on something together. He said he knew I would understand because we are friends. I said we are roommates, not a checking account. I said you took something that was not yours without asking. I said you sold it. You did not pawn it with a ticket. You did not leave collateral. You sold it. If a stranger does that, we call it theft. If a roommate does that, the word does not change. He said he planned to replace it exactly. He said he could even upgrade me to a newer model. He offered to send me a transfer right now for a deposit. His phone stayed in his pocket. His hands stayed empty. I remembered the list on the fridge. Borrowing expensive items requires permission. I remembered his small eyes. The borrowed headphones. The speaker. The passwords. The late utilities. The pattern drew itself. I put the screenshots on the table. The listing. The chat. The transfer. The reflection of our rug in the close-up photo. He stared at the table like maybe the paper could stop existing if he avoided eye contact long enough. He said I was making a big deal out of something he could fix. He said I was being dramatic. He said I was threatening his housing over a gaming box. I said you're threatening your housing. I said I want my console back or full repayment now. I said I want the dock, the controllers, the memory card case, and any games you removed. I said if you cannot do that tonight, we will discuss next steps in writing. And those steps may include your removal from the lease and a report to the police. He called me cruel. I called it consequences. We stood in the kitchen and looked at each other like strangers. After he went to his room to think, I sat at the table and considered what to do. It is one thing to say strong words. It is another thing to pick a path and live with the fallout. I thought about the lease. Both of our names are on it. Ending a living arrangement is paperwork and money and time. I thought about the landlord. She likes stability. She does not like mid-lease drama. I thought about the police. Filing a report is simple in theory and complicated in practice. It is an official line you cannot erase. It turns a roommate problem into a record with a case number and a shadow that follows people. I made a list. Option A, create a written repayment plan. Demand a significant portion up front. Set a schedule for the rest. Change the locks on my bedroom and buy a small safe for the living room. Install a camera that faces the TV area to deter further borrowing. Keep the peas for the rest of the lease. Risk that he backslides and I spend months chasing money and guarding my things in my own home. Option B, end the living arrangement. Give him 48 hours to return the console or pay the full replacement value for everything he sold or separated. If he fails, file a police report with the receipts I collected. Ask the landlord for a release and find a new roommate or take over the rent alone. Risk the cost and stress now to protect the next months of my life. I added a third option and then crossed it out. Option C was do nothing. Accept his apology. Hope it never happens again. It was a dream option. It belonged to the version of us from the first months, when kindness and trust felt enough. That version did not survive the marketplace listing. I texted my sister. She gave me the console years ago when I graduated. She said, do what you need to do to feel safe. She said, do not let someone rewrite your boundary into a suggestion. I looked at the empty shelf. I looked at the table with the printed screenshots. I knew my answer. I chose option B. I wrote an email to him so there would be a record. I kept the language plain and precise. I stated that the console, the dock, the 2 controllers, and the memory card case are my property. I stated that he listed and sold the console without permission. I attached screenshots of the listing, the chat, and the buyer's redacted transfer. I demanded either the return of my console and accessories or full repayment of the replacement value within 48 hours. I stated that failing either, I would file a police report and provide the documentation. I CC'd my personal email and saved a PDF copy. I then emailed the landlord. I said there had been a serious breach of trust and I intended to end the living arrangement. I asked about the process for releasing one tenant from the lease and replacing with another. I kept names out of it for the moment. I asked for a call the next morning. He replied to my email within 10 minutes. He said he could not get the console back because the buyer had already left with it. He said he could pay half the price now and half next week. He said if I went to the police, I would ruin his life over electronics. I replied that half now and half later would only work if the first payment arrived tonight and the second payment arrived within 7 days, and that any failure would result in a report. I also requested the dock and any accessory still in his possession be returned immediately. He sent the first transfer within the hour. The amount matched half of the agreed value. He placed the dock and one controller on the coffee table and texted that he could not find the second controller or the memory card case. I added those to the balance. I told him the 48-hour clock was still running. The next day, the landlord called. She agreed to let me seek a replacement tenant if he left. She said she would need a signed notice from both of us. I printed the form and left it on the table. He signed it that evening without looking at me. We set his move out for the end of the week. On day 2, the buyer messaged me again. They said the console worked but had no box or manual, and they felt uneasy. I offered to reimburse them if they were willing to return it to me and let me give the money back to my roommate as part of the settlement. They declined, but offered to send a short note confirming the purchase time and location. I thanked them. I saved the note. I told my roommate that if the second payment did not arrive, I would file the report. He sent it on day 7 at the edge of the deadline. I confirmed receipt and reminded him of his move out. He moved out with 2 friends in a borrow van. He left behind a mug and a tangled phone charger and the echo of months that looked like friendship. The apartment smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. I stood in the living room and looked at the empty shelf. It felt like a scar. He paid what he owed and the ledger balanced, but the balance was numbers and the loss was something else. A small faith in the safety of home had been spent and could not be returned. I changed the locks on my bedroom. I bought a small safe for passports and backup drives. I installed a camera that faces the living room and only records when I arm it, for when future roommates move in. I took photos of serial numbers for every device I own. I saved them in a document with dates. I labeled storage bins. I updated the list on the fridge for my next roommate, and this time I wrote in bigger letters. Ask before borrowing. No exceptions. I thought about calling what happened a misunderstanding. The truth is not that gentle. It was a choice. He chose to treat my property as a short-term loan to solve a crisis I did not create. He chose not to ask because asking would have exposed the plan to the light. He chose to use words like borrow and upgrade and team to try to soften what he had done. He chose to become the kind of person who turned a shared address into leverage. I'm not a judge. I know that money fear can scramble good judgment. I know that panic can make people do stupid things. I can hold that truth and still defend my boundary. Holding both is adulthood. Holding both is how you stay kind without being naive. If you share a home with someone, I hope your story is boring. I hope your roommate is the type who leaves you the last slice of pizza and asks before touching your charger. If your story looks like mine, I hope you keep receipts. I hope you write things down. I hope you remember that you're not cruel for naming what happened. You're not dramatic for asking to feel safe where you sleep. The console is back on the shelf now. I bought a used one to replace what was sold. It is not the same as the gift from my sister, but it plays, and the living room feels like mine again when the title screen hums. I light a candle. I press start. I breathe. The apartment is quiet. The boundary lines are bright again. Here is where I need a judgment from people who do not know me. I demanded full repayment, set a 48-hour deadline, and told my roommate I would file a police report if he failed. I told the landlord I wanted to end the living arrangement, and I followed through. I did not shout. I did not threaten anything I was not willing to do. I used the receipts I had, and I set terms. Some mutual friends say I went nuclear. They say I should have accepted a slower repayment plan and kept him in the apartment because housing is hard to find. They say I embarrassed him by treating him like a criminal over a console. They say I should have remembered how generous he has been with cooking and rides. They say I should have waited for his next paycheck and then pretended none of it happened. Other friends say I did the bare minimum. They say I should have filed the report immediately. They say I should have pushed for charges. They say I should have told the landlord everything in the first email and refused any compromise. They say I let him save face when he did not deserve it. I am somewhere in the middle. I do not want to ruin someone's life. I also do not want to train someone to believe that stealing from a roommate is a speed bump rather than a wall. I believe in second chances that cost something. I believe in making amends that involve more than words. I believe in leaving when trust is broken in a way that makes staying feel like holding your breath. So, AITA for ending the living arrangement and demanding full repayment with a hard deadline. AITA for saying the word theft when he preferred the word borrow. AITA for choosing the version of the future where I feel safe in my own home. Tell me what you would have done. Tell me if there was a third path I did not see. I am listening. I have receipts, and I'm trying to choose better people and be one next time.